Hello, good morning and good evening. Today I have come with a second slide of reader response criticism. And last time I talked about all the three types of reader response criticism. Today I am talking about reader response criticism, especially psychological reader response theory. By Tyson, it is second slide. Psychoanalytic critic Norman Holland also believes that readers' motives strongly influence how they read. Reader response criticism, psychological criticism means how readers psychologically are influenced by the work and how they interpret the literary work. It depends upon the interpretation of the literary works on the influence that the readers get on their psyche. Despite his claim, Holland is a main person who talks about psychoanalytic criticism. Despite his claim, at least in his early work, that an objective test exists. Indeed, he calls his method transactive analysis because he believes that reading involves a transaction between the reader and the real text. Holland focuses on what readers' interpretations reveal about themselves, not about the text. It means he does not give importance to the text, it gives importance to the readers. How readers' interpretation reveal about themselves, how they bring the meaning from the reading of the text. That is much more important. That's why readers' psychological interpretation, how it is. He gives more importance to the readers, less emphasis to the text. Given this analysis of the subjective analysis of the reader, is sometimes referred as an subjective reader response critics. Sometimes people say that theorists say that he belongs to subjective reader response critic because he's talking about the reader. However, Holland employs psychoanalytic concepts and focuses on the psychological responses of the readers. Is focusing upon the psychological responses of the readers, responses of their interpretation of the text. Many theorists think of him as a psychological reader response critic rather than subjective reader response critic, right? Because he's talking about the psychological responses of the reader. He's talking about the psychological influences that readers get through the reading of the text. So he is not a subjective reader response critic, but he is rather psychological reader response critic. Holland believes that we read to literary text with the same psychological responses we bring to events in our daily lives. That means there is a similarity of reading literary text and then the handling of the psychological responses in the daily events of our life. To use a simple example, if I'm quick to dislike any acquaintances who remind me of my alcoholic father, then I probably will be quick to dislike any fictional character who reminds me of him. That means if a reader does not like about his alcoholic father, and if he finds the similar type of character in the novel, in the fiction, and the reader does not like to read that character, does not appreciate that character, or if my overriding psychological trait is my need to control my world, then I probably will be threatened by the literary text that undermine my sense of control. For example, text in which I cannot find a powerful character with whom I can identify, or in which I cannot find the kind of orderly, logical world in which I feel comfortable. That means if the reader is overriding a strong person psychologically, and if the reader does not find the similar type of character in the text that he is reading and that he or she is reading and interpreting, and the reader does not like even that character and does not feel comfortable to read, does not feel logical to read, does not feel that he or she is in a logical world to read. So my defense in this situation might be to dislike or the text, or misunderstand it, or stop reading it altogether. If this sort of situation comes in the reader's life and the reader's only defense is either to dislike the text or to misunderstand the text, or stop reading the text. He or she can do any one of these activities, right? That is why it is based with the reader response criticism. According to Holland, that copying process is interpretation. When a reader copies with the text, that is called interpretation. The immediate goal of interpretation, like the immediate psychological goal of our daily lives, is to fulfill our psychological needs or desires. That means when the reader is reading a text and he or she has psychological needs and desires to fulfill, and that reader, if does not fulfill that need, psychological needs and desires, and he or she does not read that particular text, right? And imagine, for example, two readers who at some point in their lives have felt victimized, perhaps picked on by siblings, rejected by peers, or neglected by a parent for reasons beyond their control. That means if a person is neglected by the peers, by the friends, if the reader is rejected by the parent, being out of control, and at that time the reader does not feel good, the reader feels being victimized. In the same way, if the reader does not find the supportive characters, the supportive events, similar events of his life or her life, and the reader does not like to read it, reader does not feel satisfied, reader does not exactly interpret the text. In that sense, reader either neglect the text, or stop reading the text, or avoid just any concept of liking, right? These readers' defenses probably would be raised by the character of Piccola. There is a character Piccola in Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, because they would perceive her as a victim as they themselves had been. Let's say, in other words, reading about Piccola would probably remind them of their own painful childhood isolation. Piccola's life is painful. Piccola's childhood is painful. Piccola is a very simple character in The Bluest Eye of Toni Morrison's. Piccola is almost cheated. She's hurt. She is always misbehaved by others. And readers, when feels the similar situation, finds the similar situation in his or her life, and they feel, oh, similar condition, character of Piccola is there reminded in his life. In this way, the reader identifies with the aggressor. If the reader finds that Piccola-like condition in his or her childhood, an aggressor becomes angry rather than with the victim, and temporarily relieves his or her own psychological pain. Aggressor at that time is maybe weeping, starts weeping, maybe feels just like a relief, temporary relief, a kind of medication the reader feels at that moment. The second reader, for whom victimized characters are threatened to stimulate painful childhood memories, might cope with Piccola by minimizing the character's suffering, focusing instead on some positive quality Piccola retains intact. For example, Piccola is the only character in the novel who never hurts anyone, and she will remain forever in a state of childlike innocence. The second type of reader, who exactly does not like the negative, victimized condition, painful condition of Piccola, feels to read only positive qualities of Piccola, because Piccola was a very good character and in the novel, and she never hurt anyone. She always remains childlike innocence. Only those positive qualities the reader presents, and all victimized conditions, suffering, pain that Piccola felt in her early life are ignored by the readers. The readers do not like those qualities to be reminded in their own life. This reader denies Piccola's psychological pain in order to deny her own pain. Refusing psychological pain of Piccola means refusing, denying her or his own pain, right? So negative qualities, painful qualities, suffering qualities are refused, denied, disliked to interpret by the second type of reader. Alan calls the pattern of our psychological conflicts and coping strategies with our own identity theme. That means readers interpret the text, readers read the text with the identity theme, readers identify the text with their own life, with their own life event, with their own life experiences, and those experiences, those life events are the identity theme of the reader, and they interpret the text on the identity theme, right? He believes that in our daily lives we project that identity theme onto every situation we encounter, and thus perceive the world through the lens of our psychological experience. That means we perceive the text, readers perceive the text through the lens of psychological experience. What sort of psychological experiences the readers have, and through that eye, through that aspect, through that lens, they interpret, they read the text. Analogously, when we read literature, we project our identity theme or variations of it onto the text. Identity theme is brought there in the text. That is, in various ways we unconsciously create in the text the world that exists in our mind. We create the text, the world that is exactly found in the mind, that exists in our mind. Our interpretations then are products of the fears, defenses, needs, desires we project onto the text, right? Our interpretations of the text are the products of the fears and defenses of the readers, needs, desires, they are projected in the text. Interpretation is thus primarily a psychological process rather than intellectual one in reader response, psychological reader response criticism. It is psychological interpretation. It is not intellectual reading process. It is psychological reflections of the text, right? For example, the two hypothetical readers who react to Piccola as described above might interpret the character, respectively, as the representative of self-destructive human frailty means weakness. Like the biblical Eve, there is self-destruction has taken place in the life of Adam and Eve. Or in contrast, is representative of spiritual innocence. There would be reflection of spiritual innocence without realizing that their interpretations emerge from their own unconscious psychological conflicts. Maybe knowingly they present the just destructive frailty of human frailty like that of Eve of Bible, or just unconsciously they bring the psychological conflicts. Holland's definition of interpretation can thus be summarized as a process consisting of the three stages or modes that occur and reoccur as we read. There are three types of modes. Okay, what are those three modes? First mode is defense, right? Second mode is fantasy, right? See there. First, in the defense mode, our psychological defenses are raised by the text. For example, we find Piccola threatening because she reminds us of our own experiences of victimization, and we defend the society, we defend that reading process. Second, in the fantasy mode, we find a way to interpret the text that will tranquilize those defenses and thus fulfill our desire to be protected from threats to our psychological equilibrium. For example, we minimize Piccola's pain by focusing on a dislike innocence that will remain forever ours. Third mode is called transformation mode. We change, readers change. We transform the first two steps into abstract interpretation so that we can get the psychological satisfaction we desire without acknowledging to ourselves the anxiety producing defenses and guilt producing fantasies that underlie our assessment to the text. For example, we decide that Piccola represents spiritual innocence and we transform her as a spiritual character. Of course, the possible value of Holland's method seems evident for facilitating therapeutic psychological self-knowledge. That means these three types of modes of reading: transformation mode, fantasy mode, and then see let's see three different modes, right? Defense mode, fantasy mode, and transformation mode. exactly brings a kind of psychological knowledge, self-knowledge, and readers get a kind of knowledge through that sort of reading. Whether we are analyzing a person or a literary text, every act of interpretation takes place within the context of the interpreter's identity theme. It does not go beyond the identity theme, as we have already talked. Understanding an author's identity theme allows us to fully experience as minimizing self and others. As a gift the artist offers us. We feel that artist has given a kind of thing that is a gift, and the artist has offered, and that becomes a kind of identity thing or therapeutic medication for the readers. That is called psychological reader response theory. Now another one is social reader response theory. While the individual reader's subjective response to the community to the literary text plays the crucial role in the subjective reader response theory, for social reader response theory, usually associated with the later work of Stanley Fish. Stanley Fish is the person who focuses about the reader response, social reader response theory. There is a no purely individual subjective response. He says that it is not subjective response, it is not individual response of the literary text, it is the response of the interpretive community, it is the response of the intellectual community, right? So large number of students are sophisticated. There would be two types of readers: sophisticated and unsophisticated readers. Sophisticated readers may be reflective, giving good ideas, maybe expert in explanations, and they present their ideas. Unsophisticated means sophisticated, maybe philosophers, thinkers, practitioners. Unsophisticated means students, teachers, and common teachers. They would be interpreting, right? So that is called interpretive community. What we take to be our individual subjective responses to literature are really products of the interpretive community to which we belong. We readers, we practitioners also belong to the interpretive community. By interpretive community, this means those who share the interpretive strategies we bring to text when we read, whether or not we realize we are using interpretive strategies, and whether or not we are aware that other people share interpretive strategies is to be shared. These interpretive strategies always result from various sorts of institutionalized assumptions, especially high schools, churches, colleges, by prevailing cultural attitudes and philosophers about what makes a text a piece of literature, instead of a letter or a legal document or a short sermon, and what meanings we are supposed to find in it. An interpretive community can be as sophisticated means aware of its critical enterprise, as the community produced by the followers of specific Marxist critical theorists. That means sophisticated means philosophers, thinkers who are expert. Or an interpretive community can be an unsophisticated, means unaware of its interpretive strategies. Those who know the interpretive strategies are called sophisticated. Those who do not know the interpretive strategies are called unsophisticated, like the community produced by the high school teacher who instructs his students. That is a natural to read literature in sorts of static symbols, unchangeable symbols that tell us the hidden meaning of the society, right? Story. That is why sophisticated and unsophisticated readers are there. Sophisticated readers are those readers who are aware of interpretive strategies. They know very well how to interpret. Unsophisticated readers are those who are not aware of interpretive strategies. Of course, interpretive communities are not static. They evolve over time, and readers can belong consciously or unconsciously to more than one community at the same time, or they can change from one community to another at different times in their lives. Fish claims that a multiplicity of communal authorities based on the multiplicity of interpretive communities to which students already belong determines how students read the text in the first place. In other words, for Fish, Readers do not interpret poems, they create them. They create the poems. He demonstrated this point rather dramatically when he taught 2 college courses back to back. At the end of his first class, he wrote an assignment on the board that consisted to the following list of linguist names his students were studying. At the end of the class, this Stanley Fish gave exercise home assignment to the students with the spelling mistakes and the name of the just linguist, and told them to interpret it as a poem. See, Jacob, Rosburn, Levin, Thorne, Hines, these are the names of the linguist. When his second class entered the room, he told them that the writing on the board was a 17th century religious poem like the ones they had been studying, and asked them to analyze it. In fact, Stanley Fish was bringing only creative activities, and it was not a poem. It was almost, these were the names of the linguist that he had given. And the last question marks is the confusion in spelling of the man, of the linguist. And is there a text? He put the question. But the readers, when they applied, his students, when they applied interpretive strategies, they interpreted it. They made it poem. Even the name of the linguist, they were able to make the poem. In the discussion that ensued, his students concluded that the poem celebrated God's love and mercy in giving his only begotten Son for our redemption. Their interpretation accounted beautifully for every word in the poem, including, among other evidence, the following points. The poem is in the shape of a cross or an altar. Jacob suggests Jacob's ladder, a reference to the Christian ascent into the heaven. Rose and balm literally means rose tree and refers to the Virgin Mary, the rose without thorns, whose son Jesus is the means by which the human beings can climb to heaven. And thorn thus refers to Jesus' crown of thorns, a symbol of sacrifice he made to redeem us. And the letters that occur most frequently in the poem are S, O, and N. These are the letters. So this is how they interpreted the poem. The name of the linguist became a poem, and they interpreted that it was a religious poem. They said that it was Jesus, and there was a ladder of God and for Christ to go to heaven. And rosebound means rosemary, and bound, that is Christ who was burned, and thorn means the crown of thorns that was put especially on the head of Christ at the time of sacrifice. And for the sacrifice, redemption of the human beings, he was dead. And the poem occurs as O and N, and that means swan, maybe. This sort of interpretation, the readers applied, Stanley Fish students applied interpretive strategies, and they were able to make the poem, create the poem out of the name list of the linguist. A list of linguist names or anything else can become a poem if a reader or group of readers uses the interpretive strategies required to make it one. They did it. That is, the qualities that make poem a poem do not reside in the text, but in the interpretive strategies we have learned, consciously or unconsciously, before we ever encounter the text. Is how interpretive strategies we apply. Social reader response theory does not offer us a new way to read any text, nor does it promote any form of literary criticism that already exists. After all, its point is that no interpretation, and therefore no form of literary criticism, no claim to reveal what is in the text. That means no interpretation, no poem is created. No interpretive strategies are applied, and no just poetry becomes interpretive one. Each interpretation will simplify whatever its interpretive strategies put there. If we put interpretive strategies, if the readers put interpretive strategies there, and even non-poetic works become poetic one. By understanding the principle of social reader response theory, we can become more aware of what it is we are doing when we interpret our text. and more aware of what our peers and students are doing as well, right? Such awareness could be especially useful to teachers by helping them analyze their students' interpretive strategies, helping them decide if and when to try to replace those strategies with others, and helping them take responsibility for the strategies they choose to teach instead of hiding behind the beliefs that certain ways of reading are natural inherently right because they represent what is in the text, right? Okay, let us see. Now that is all about reader response, social reader response theory, right? And what is in social reader response theory? It is there are two types of readers. It is not individual response, it is a response of collective interpretive community student. And there are two types of interpretive communities: sophisticated and unsophisticated. Sophisticated readers are those readers who are aware of interpretive strategies. They are thinkers, philosophers, practitioners. And unsophisticated readers are those readers who are not aware of interpretive strategies, and they are the teachers and students, and they interpret it in the text in the form of static symbols. Now, defining readers. Who are readers? There are various types of readers: implied readers, sophisticated readers, unsophisticated readers, okay, real readers, and ideal readers, fictional readers, right? And theoretical readers, hypothetical readers. Different types of readers are there. Some readers' response theorists refer to readers, while others refer to the reader. When theorists discuss actual readers whose responses they analyze, as Norman Holland and David Bliss do, for example, they refer to them as readers or students, or call them by some other name that denotes real people. Readers means real people. Students means real students who read it. Many theorists analyze the reading experience of the hypothetical ideal reader encountering a specific text. As for example, in our examination of affective stylistics, in these cases, references to the reader are really references to the critic, analyzing his or her own carefully documented reading experience of a specific text according to specific reader response principles, right? Because the experience of hypothetical readers may or may not be responded to the experience of actual readers. Some hypothetical readers have been given names that describe the reading activity they represent. Thus, his practice of affective stylistics, he refers to the informed readers, the reader who has attained the literary competency necessary to experience the text as if he himself does in the fullness of its linguistic and literary complexity, and who conscientiously tries to suppress the personal or idiosyncratic dimension of his or her response. Other terms you may run across the refer of similar hypothetical readers include the educated readers, the ideal readers, optimal readers. Analogously, Wolfgang Isher uses the term implied readers, by which he means the reader that the text seems to be addressing while the writer is writing, right? Whose characteristics we can deduce by studying the style in which the text is written and apparent attitude of the narrative towards the reader. That means implied readers means at the time of writing, the writer imagines a kind of reader and he has put a kind of reader there in the text and he writes. That is implied readers, ideal readers, imaginative readers. Other terms we may encounter that refer to readers implied by the text include the intended reader and the narrative. Right? These are different types of readers. So this theory, this book has applied, this Tyson's book has applied all the interpretation in of theory, application of theory in the interpretation, practical interpretation, especially to the Great Gatsby, the novel by Fitzgerald. So I advise to read those interpretations, application of the theory in the text, and please improve your reading. That would be good for more information, for more knowledge of reading. Thank you.